What is the human connection? I would say it is language or communication with one another. We're going to look at what language registers are and how this affects our communication. First, do you agree with this statement? In different situations, people use different language styles. In other words, they talk differently depending upon the situation that they are in. Well, yes, I think we would all agree that you talk differently depending upon the situation. So what is a language register? Different language styles used for different purposes in different social settings. And we're talking about both in public and private. Every language, no matter where you are, has 5 registers. So we're going to look at each of these 5. First, we have the frozen, then the formal, consultative, casual, and intimate. So how do you decide of these 5 which language register to use? Well, it depends on where you are, the social setting, the environment that you are in. It also depends on the topic and who you are talking to. Is it a friend? Is it a parent? Is it a professor? Who is it you are talking to? Here's the rule. You can go from one register to the next register, usually without any conflicts or without any problems. So we have both public and private social settings. The public, in public settings, you usually have the frozen, formal, and consultative. In the private social settings, you have casual and intimate. But you can go from public, in the public realm, from frozen to formal, or consultative to frozen or formal. Or in the private setting, you can go from casual to intimate and back and forth, usually without any kind of issues. So what is frozen? The frozen language register is language that rarely ever changes or never changes. And so when we're talking about certain speech like Pledge of Allegiance, it's almost like a script. It is frozen, it doesn't change. The Lord's Prayer in religious settings, that is again, a script. It does not change. That is a frozen language. The preamble to the Constitution, it is a frozen language. And just like that's why you kind of like frozen in time is a good way to think about it. It just doesn't matter the time or the setting. It's always the same language. Hope that makes sense. Formal language is usually a one-way communication when it's using when you're talking to someone else or someone is talking and you're listening. And in formal language, use complete sentences, proper sentences, very formal. In interview, one person, the person interviewing you would be speaking, and then you're giving your answers in complete sentences, very formal. Academic language in a classroom, think about a college classroom. It's usually very formal. Public speaking, or when you're listening to a public speaker, they are usually speaking in formal, complete grammar, correct grammar, complete sentences, that type. Then another language is the consultative. This is two-way communication. It's a back and forth. And you do not have to have any past experience with that person. And it also can be a mix of formal and casual too. So this two-way communication, we can think of like as a doctor and a patient. They're kind of talking to each other back and forth, and he's maybe consulting the patient, So that's why we get the name consultative. Employer to employee, lawyer and judge. There's communication. It can be formal, but it can also be on the casual side, like with a student and teacher. Then we have casual language register. The casual is what you are probably most familiar with, or maybe the most comfortable with. It's talking with your friends. You use slang, you use very common language, abbreviations. You're not worried about proper grammar and complete sentences. Very, very casual. And lastly, we have intimate language. And that's those private conversations, usually in a household, like between a parent and a child. Between spouses or couples and brothers and sisters, siblings or twins. Twins have this intimate language, they always say, and they can almost know what each other's thinking, but it's this very personal language that usually you don't share outside of that close group. It's your turn. Think back, and can you name all 5 of the language registers? And then can you give an example of each?